Alba, Sumprim, Rodney, Nkrumah, Boateng, and Bisi Adjapon, three writers from Ghana. And I'll just like us to start with Rodney, who is live here with us. He is the author of a few books, and he's also working on some new works that will be published soon. A few of his books include readings with us together with Alba and Bisi. So, Rodney, thank you for joining us, and
Thank you.
would just like to start with a short, yeah,
Sorry, the sound is very bad.
conversation. If you
Can
could
I?
just give us little bit more detail about yourself. If you could give us a little bit more information about yourself. Yeah, I was saying if you could give us a little bit more detail about yourself as a writer and a little bit of what you do outside writing as well.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Um, I started toying seriously with the idea of writing somewhere around 2000. Before that, I had been involved in writing some school plays when I was much younger. But my first book
Okay.
published was Nkrumah, that came out in 2009, and then eventually we did Facebook in 2017. But before then, I had done a book on the history of my alma mater, Foray School, which we launched in 2015. I'm currently working on my first novel. I'm about a third of my way through, and I've also started toying with the idea of a novel set in Corona, Ghana, so to speak. That's what I call it, my Corona novel. I also work. I work at the Ministry of Education as the press secretary to the minister, and I also write a column in the Daily. Beyond that, my life is pretty boring. Aside spending it on social media, getting into political fights every now and then. But other than that, I'm quite well behaved. Thank you.
Okay, and how do you manage writing with your day job and writing in different fields? I mean, you do write a lot of genres. So how do you manage writing in different genres and then writing as a full-time employed Ghanaian?
My luck has been that I'm quite a nocturnal being, and almost all my books have essentially written in the dark of the night. I thrive on very little sleep, and I work best, and my juices flow better when it's late and everything is quiet and I don't have any interruptions and that sort of thing. And so sometimes I appear at work a bit groggy and all of that stuff, but I try to use my weekends as I can. I spend quite some weekends in Kumasi, the funeral thing. Um, but I also try to find a way. In terms of the genre of writing, I try to be as versatile as possible. It's just me. I prefer not to box myself in and say, this is what I do. I write as and when it comes to me. I've tried a little poetry. I've tried a little drama. It's not quite bad, but I think I express myself better in prose. I also have a few ideas in terms of writing nonfiction books on historical figures or biographies. I helped someone to write his biography, and I found it quite an interesting area that I'd want to explore at some point. But those I want to get into nonfiction as well and have things on their various aspects of Ghanaian life, public and all of that. My work is not as demanding. It's not around the clock demanding. So sometimes after work, I'm able to sneak a few. As I work at the Ministry of Education, and there are times, as in school admissions time, when it's crazy. But a lot of times, it's a bit relatively okay for me to be able to sometimes leave work early or even at work be able to have a couple of hours to myself to do some writing. So all that helps.
Awesome. And in many of your books that in some of the books that you write, you do a lot of satire and picking on everyday life of Ghanaians, especially as a person who has lived abroad and has come back to Ghana. Um, if you could just share the experience of seeing how different things are in Ghana and in other parts of the world, and how it makes us uniquely Ghanaian, one way or the other.
My first foray abroad was when I was an undergraduate at Lagos. I was 21. I went over for 3 months. And so, really, I didn't see much. Then, subsequent holidays, I traveled to Germany and the UK. But again, I didn't see much. But my real eye opener came when I left the country after university back in 92. I was 24 then. And over the years, things just, the race issue, immigration, the weather, the language. Even though I was in England, there were times when I felt I was in a foreign land because when the natives spoke, I didn't understand what they were saying because of the accent and all of that. And so it took quite a while but I had always had that mind that Abuja was a transit period for me. I had never envisioned staying abroad for any long period of. In fact, when I left, my dream was out there, do some studies, come back in 5 years, and then do whatever it is I wanted to do in Ghana. I ended up staying 19. And I don't know, to date, I don't know how to account for those 19 long years. So I always treated this as being in transit, as in transit on my way back home. And that's how my approach was. And for a lot of my friends, they always talked about home, even though they had lived in the UK for 20, 25 years. And so there's something about abroad that doesn't quite make it home in the way that you'd want it. Even if you have the passport and you put a home and you have a family there and everything, it quite doesn't feel as at home. And I had always remembered what my father had told me, because he studied abroad as well. And he had always said to me that his desire to come back home was fueled by the fact that he wanted to be a big fish in a small pond than to be a small fish in a big sea. And that had always guided him. And I had bought into that. And so for me, living abroad, even for that long period, never quite accustomed me to ever describing myself or describing the UK as my home. I had never seen it that way. And for a lot of Ghanaians living abroad, that is how they see themselves.
Very interesting. Thank you for those enlightening comments about your experiences and how they have a factor in your writing. I think that at this point we can take a reading from you, and people watching in can send in their questions, and we will take them as well. So, Rodney, over to you with your first reading.
Thank you very much. My first reading is from chapter 7 of my first book, the Nkrumah Reflections of a Ghanaian Immigrant. Here we go. Um, Chapter 7, African Punctuality. You know the familiar story. You agree with a friend to meet near the circle overhead at 2 p.m. You arrive there at 2:45. He arrives at 3:15. No big deal. In African parlance, 2 p.m. means around 2 p.m., which in turn means any time from 2 p.m. or 2:30, 3 p.m. It is only a loose guide, a very elastic appointment. We are talking GMT, Ghana Made Time. The concept of African time permeates the national psyche. After all, the work is not for my father. It's a favorite quip, especially in the public sector. A Durbar is scheduled for 11 a.m., yet the dignitaries, including ministers of state, arrive at 1 p.m. For how late you are proves how important you are. In Western society, where a 7:38 a.m. train actually leaves at 7:38 a.m., the Germans, the Swiss, and the Japanese are specialists at such military positions. Only a fool will not make an effort to rush to catch that train, especially if you'll otherwise be late for work. Once this is ingrained in you, you tend to apply it to other situations. Starting work at 9 a.m. means exactly 9 a.m. If you are paid by the hour, then the phrase time is money means a lot to you. Ladies and gentlemen, you dare not tell your arbitrary boss that you are late simply because it was raining. You will be asked if you know what umbrellas were designed for. certainly not as a fashion accessory, he will hasten to add. The Ghanaian may pick up the timekeeping habits of his host citizens when he travels and settles abroad. However, whilst you can take the Ghanaian out of Ghana, you can never possibly take Ghana out of the Ghanaian, unless he has to be somewhere at a given time to obtain or retain a job. You can trust him to frequently lapse into his basic homegrown habits, which in fact are his default position. Of course, the Ghanaian attitude to timekeeping is appalling. In this modern day and age, time is money. The time wasted could be spent doing other productive things. Being late for work affects productivity, which in turn costs money. Attitudes to timekeeping need to change. But hold on, is African punctuality such a bad thing? What is the point in having your life ruled by the dictates of a watch? Is life not complicated enough as it is? Back home, we like to take our time in everything we do. If we have an appointment for around 2 p.m., then what is the problem so long as everybody knows this to be a general guide only? In any case, over in Abuja, it is easier to honor an appointment because you can estimate your travel time with a fair degree of accuracy. You catch the 2:34 p.m. train at point A, and you know exactly how long it takes to get to point B. It is a different system back home. You may indeed get to the station early enough, only to find an empty trotro, which of course won't budge till it's full, because the driver is enjoying a hearty meal of fufu and goat meat light soup at a chop bar nearby, and will be summoned only by his mate, only when the trotro is fully loaded. After finishing his meal, he strolls casually towards his vehicle, belching intermittently as he engages in friendly banter with the hawkers at the station. The white man's timekeeping habits may be impressive, in that it increases efficiency and productivity, etc. But alas, that has a certain mechanical touch to it. The morning rush hour in the big cities of the Western world is a depressing sight. Silent, glum-faced commuters pouring out of buses and trains, charging ahead like a herd of buffaloes, checking their watches every now and then just to make sure they can get to work on time. A little traffic jam sends their blood pressure soaring. Their lives are ruled by alarm clocks, those mechanical monstrosities that rudely curtail your blissful sleep just when you get to the best part of dreamland. Take away a white man's watch and you have robbed him of his soul, rendering him unable to function, like a navigator without a compass. On the other hand, give a Ghanaian, or an African for that matter, a watch, and you might as well stick a plaster on his aching belly. At best, he'll treat it as a fashion accessory. African punctuality is an integral part of the continent's culture, its social fabric, and its esprit de corps. It would be a shame to dismantle this concept totally. But admittedly, we have to come in line with the 21st century. As a compromise, maybe Africa needs a two-tier timekeeping system. European time where it is really, really necessary, and African time for informal social events and appointments and visiting friends. So, dear Ghana man abroad, next time you go home on holiday, do everybody a favor. Dance to the beat and switch to African time. Take it easy and get rid of your watch. Unless, of course, you want to show off your imitation Rolex. If a friend promises to come and see you at 3 p.m., expect him after 4 p.m. And don't stress yourself. Get a cold beer and wait. Remember, you are on holiday after all. As Bob Marley famously sang, the sun is shining, weather is sweet. What is the rush? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that rather humorous reading. There's a comment here from Abna Asantua Probia from Facebook, and she says, Aden Ejumano Ayemi Papa dear, and I can't even imagine anyone saying that to their boss here in the US. Your book gives a voice to most Ghanaians abroad. It was fun for me to read the book. So I believe that Abena has read your book in full and
Thank
she
you, Abra.
did
I thank
enjoy
you.
it. Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to bring Alba into the conversation, and because the reading that Rodney just gave has a lot of similarities with the kind of books that I have read, at least from her collection. And Alba K. Sumprim is the author of books such as the imported Ghanaian and A Place of Beautiful Nonsense. And so Alba, I have read the imported Ghanaian, and so when Rodney was reading, I did see a lot of similar things in someone who has a Ghanaian who has lived abroad and back into Ghana and seen the things that make us very unique in our own way. What was the inspiration behind writing the imported Ghanaian and other books that you have written?
Sorry, the sound was a little bad. Could you just repeat your last sentence?
Yeah, so I was asking, what is the inspiration for
Can
your
you hear
books, such
me?
as the yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Oops.
Yeah, can you hear me, Alba? Okay, I think that we've lost Alba. So I'll just like to cross over to Bisi Adjapon, who is the author of Women and Frogs, written in 28, published in 2018, and has had a lot of weight here in Ghana. And Bisi also happens to be a writer who has lived part of her life in the USA. And I don't know if she has anything to say about nostalgia from Rodney's recent reading.
Well, hello. Hi, Rodney. It was very interesting to
Oh,
Hi.
hear you read. I
thank you.
really enjoyed listening to you. I also lived abroad and I know exactly what it is like to be able to, speak freely to your boss like that, in Ghana here. I came back here and I worked for one year, just 1 year here. It was very hard for me because what is considered proactive in America is considered disrespect here. So you're always having to walk that fine line between respect and being assertive and all that. So that was very interesting to hear you read. And I wonder, of course, let me confess, I haven't read your book yet. I only heard about it a few days ago, just because of this readathon. But I'm really looking forward to reading it. And how long have you been, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been here permanently in Ghana?
Okay, I've been back here since 2011, so that makes it 9 years this April. Now, I'll tell you what, when I came, I've been coming and going, so it was like, a plane landing, it was gradual. I didn't crash land. And so once I came, I decided I wasn't going back. And then in 2014, at the height of the doomsday, I had to travel to London for 4 weeks. And after a week, I was fed up. Then I realized that no matter what the situation was in Ghana, I simply had had enough of the UK. And I haven't looked back since. I've been back a couple of times and that's been about it. But it's been a tough navigation here, I'll tell you, just on so many fronts.
Yeah, actually, that was you've answered the question I was going to ask you because regardless, I have found I tried to come back in 2006, but unlike you, mine was a crash landing. I had been away for a couple of for well over 10 years, I think. And then I showed up and I had come here on a job working for the US government. And it's very different when you come here as a diplomat. So I had such a great time. I went and then packed my things and came back. It was a shock. I just even getting lost So I didn't plan well, and because of that, I went back. But when I went back, I wasn't happy either. I went back in 2008, and I finally came back in 2017. And I know for a fact that I'm never going back. I might go for a visit, but no matter what, this is home. So yeah, I'm with you.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's nice to hear. That's nice to know.
Yeah. Bisi, speaking about home, your book of Women and Frogs is a story about a young girl who has two different homes and how she has to deal with them being a foreigner in every part, as well as other things it discusses. The book was nominated for the King Prize. It was a short story then, and then you worked on it, and it became now one of the most popular books in Ghana. Tell us a little more about the writing of your book, and then we can take a reading from you as well.
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting. Again, I'll kind of piggyback a little bit on what Rodney said. I was, in America. I had a fairly decent job. I was doing okay. But what I really wanted to do was write. And I realized, and I don't know if you have been following this hashtag that went viral on Twitter, publishing paid me. It was a hashtag to show, first of all, the discrepancy between what Black authors are paid versus what American or white authors are paid. People look at, the one or two examples that made a big splash. And remember, the only reason why Yajasi's book made such a big splash, and I'm not knocking down her writing itself, but it's because of the subject. Somebody paid $1 million for her to write about slavery, because when you write about hardship or that kind of subject, it fits in. It fits into the white narrative, and they like that. But the idea of Black people writing about ordinary subjects like romance, like the things that bother them, that or the things that they are interested in, that is not something they want to know. So it's been coming out after that hashtag went viral. The other thing that came up was that a lot of authors were being rejected because people felt that white people were the only ones who would buy the books, the main people who would buy the books, and that people would not be interested in Black authors. So they would have a very limited percentage, allocated to Black authors. And I say that because here I was writing and I was getting very frustrated. I had an agent and we would get interest. And I even had a contract at one point with Simon and Schuster, and it got canceled for no reason, really. And so it made me very, very depressed. And so I actually just wrote this, as I said, as a short story. And then eventually, somebody wanted to publish it, and it just wasn't working out. So I decided to publish with an African publisher, and I published with Farafina in Nigeria. And then, I came down. Because of that, I moved to Ghana, and I have never looked back. I really like the fact that I wrote about something that nobody expects Black people to write about, or Africans. We are not writing about, oh, sure, there is a bit of history, in here we have the coups and all that happens. It's slightly historical, but that is just a backdrop. We're just writing about ordinary subjects that interest people, and that is just women and their place in society, their romance, their sexual evolution. So this is actually like an emotional and sexual coming of age for a girl. So it's done, and I'm very happy with its reception in Africa. So yeah. So
Yeah, it's very interesting that you. Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned the you describe your experience as a Black writer and looking for a publishing deal, and you also made mention of the some sort of the subtle politics of African writing and what we are expected to write if we want to sort of secure the bigger deals. But I think that for your book, and this is just a commentary I'll make before you go into your reading, the reason why your book did so well is because, like you said, it does touch on issues that affect everyday people. And these are the things that would affect our lives one way or the other. So we have AC who is going through all sorts of um, coming of age issues with her father, with herself, with her mother, with her identity as an African as well. And these topics are things that really resonate with us. So, Bisi, I'd like you to now take your first reading, and then we can continue the conversation.
Two readings,
Bisi,
right?
okay. Yes, yes, we'll go with two readings. So we'll
You
take the
will just
first
have two
one.
readings. Okay, so let me
Yeah.
start with the first
So
one.
we'll take your first reading, and then we'll come back.
Okay. So in my first reading, I'm going to start from a place where AC has a big sister. AC has big sisters who are old enough to be married, and this one is a secondary school. The sister is in secondary school, and as you know, when we were growing up, for some of us, our parents were very, very strict, and you weren't supposed to have anything to do with men, certainly not before marriage, but just very strict. You're not even supposed to have a boyfriend, much less, get pregnant. So here she is playing with her younger brother, and then her big sister comes home. So I'm going to start from there. And this is narrated from the point of view of AC, who is only about, in this place, she's about 11 years old. And so she's speaking in the present tense uh, about everything. So let me start. I am about to slay Kwabena Goliath when we catch sight of Sister Abena coming down the path. Sister Abena has come, I say. I drop my catapult and run towards her. Kwabena dashes after me. Sister Mansa and Crocodile Joyce rush outside too. I get to Sister Abena first, but I have to stop myself from getting knocked backwards by her stomach. It is hard and rounder than the biggest ball I have ever seen. She has a baby in her stomach. She did the bad thing. She drops her two bags, panting. Essie, what to say? My, the words catch in my throat and I swallow. My body is good. Kwabena flings himself at her. He doesn't seem to notice anything. She rubs the top of his head. Crocodile jaws and Mansa hang back, whispering the way people do at funerals. Akwaba. Sister Abena thanks them. She asks if Papa is home and how is Auntie and everybody. We say the right things. Yes, everybody is fine. Auntie is home. Papa too. Sister Mansa and Crocodile Jaws take a bag each and we walk heavily to the house. It's so silent. You can hear the suitcases swish on the grass. You can even hear the butterflies' wings and the whir of insects. Somewhere, a crow mocks us. Go, go! In the sitting room, Papa has music going loudly, written by a man called Handel. Papa says it's not a misspelling of Handel. The woman singing sounds desperate. I know that my Redeemer. Sister Bina has to go in there and greet Papa. I think she needs a redeemer if she is pregnant. I whisper to Kwabena to follow, but Auntie stops me. Effie, you are too fond of adult matters. Get out of here. I hiss at Kwabena. Come on. We dart around the back of the house to the front and skulk outside the veranda with its yellow screen. The sitting room door has opens to the veranda and it's ajar. The music has stopped. Sister Abner is in trouble, Abner says. Shh, shut up so I can hear. Come on. Bend down, creep nearer, and drop into the Ixora bush. My skin feels scratched, but I don't scare. I don't care. I brush down the ants crawling up my legs, flick an insect off my arm. Papa roars, who did this to you? I sent you to a teacher training school to become a teacher, not to pick up a belly. What do they call him? The idiot. They call him Samuel Edu. How can her voice be so calm? Edu, an Asante man, no wonder. Bush people, all of them. Don't say that, Auntie says. She doesn't like it when Papa insults her people. The brave Ashantis who refused to pay taxes to the British until they shipped the Asante king off to some place called Seychelles or something like that. Papa says, what does he do, this Samuel Edu? I want to know what kind of work the fool does. Please calm down, Auntie says. Adelaide, shut up or I'll slap you. Abena, answer me. What work does he do? He's a lawyer. A lawyer? No one speaks for a moment. Well, at least that's something. There's an almost smile in Papa's voice. My learned friend, I always wanted to be a lawyer myself. There's a longer pause. Then, all right. So when is he coming to perform the rites for you? He says the baby is not his own. There's a trembling in her voice. What? He's denying the baby. He put you in the family way and now he won't be responsible. Mr. Abena doesn't answer. Tell me where he lives. Oh, no. He lives in Accra. 2 hours away, that's nothing. I will go to Accra. Just point me to his house. You see what you've done? Oh, I know what's coming. He's going to bring up everything Sister Abena has ever done wrong. Gone and ruined your life. That's what. I send you to secondary school, you get expelled. You had to run away to see boys without permission. Final year of teacher training, you get a belly. Are your legs the highway a man passes through on his way to marry someone else? Stop here. Is that too long?
Thank you, Bisi, for that reading. Yeah, no, that was just fine. Thank you for that reading. And while you were reading, I was just thinking about the stuff that you said earlier on while enjoying your very theatrical reading. You did mention that writing about certain topics is not so popular in the general literary field as an African writer. And so when you decided to, when the short story got nominated for the King Prize, and you decided to pick it up as a book project, were there any doubts as to how well will be received or how well it will do when it finally comes out?
So there
Um,
it talks the book is uh, very raw, and there is frank discussion, frank sexual encounters in there. So to be honest with you, I was worried. The other thing too was that I'm not political. So even in America, I was always an independent. I've never been Democrat or Republican. In Ghana here, I don't belong to any political party yet because I don't feel that I feel I need time to really study the issues. So I wrote with completely a non, how do I say, an equal opportunity offender. And I had to do a lot of research. So I didn't really know, first of all, how people would receive it here, as far as the really frank discussions on sex and all that. I also didn't know whether politicians would be upset with me on both sides because if you are for, I say lots of wonderful things about Nkrumah, but then there are things that are not so wonderful about Nkrumah. And I had a lot to say about Buzia good and bad, and a lot to say about Rawlings good and bad. So I was worried about that. But to my utter surprise, the reception has been really very, very good. And not just in Ghana, but in Nigeria, in South Africa. And as you know, I've been invited to so many festivals. So it's been a really wonderful surprise for me.
Thank you for that. And I'll just like to take a few comments before I come back to you, Rodney, because someone here says, David Donko says, Rodney, you write such delightful and fascinating reads. As a person with obviously diverse experiences, how do you select? Okay, so this is a question. So the person is asking, how do you select and decide what is worth putting into print. And I believe that Bisi has answered that just a bit. So we'd like to take your comments as well, Rodney.
Um, Thank you. Hello, David. Um, for me, there's the view I've always had about writing is that there's nothing such as a boring topic. It depends on how you pick it up and how you weave around it. And so I've always said, for instance, that if I sit in a trotro from Medina to Accra, just sitting in that trotro without it doing anything, by the end of that trotro journey, I can spin a good story out of just my observations. So I think it's mostly about being observant and looking at things around you and plugging into how people think or the things they do, the things they say. And I think with a creative mind, you can develop something out of it. And trust me, I've seen so many interesting things in Trotro. That are a story of its own. Whether it's a fight with a mate of a tempestuous change or someone sleeping on someone else's shoulder or that sort of thing. You can pick up anything. You can pick up any rough diamond and polish it to the extent that your ability can take you or your interest or willingness can take you. And so that has always been my approach to topical issues when I approach writing.
That is certainly true. Reminds me of a joke that goes that if you have a writer as a friend and you annoy them, be sure that you will be making a feature in their book. There's a
That's correct.
question for you. There's a question for you, Bisi, and again, David would like to know the title of the book you read from sounds quite figurative. Could you speak about that? So David wants you to speak about the title of your book.
Okay. Um, I normally like for readers to come up with their own ideas, but I think the frogs. People always think, oh, is the frogs have are the frogs representing men? But no, really, the frogs represent the obstacles that she has to overcome because she's really terrified of frogs. That's really how the book starts. It starts with her really terrified of frogs, but then the frogs become a symbol of all the things she has to overcome in terms of society's expectations, in terms of, how she's going to handle being engaged or being traditionally married, and all the things that she has to overcome, making decisions for herself. Should she have an abortion? Should she not have an abortion? And that kind of thing. So that's what it means.
Awesome. And Rodney, you mentioned that you are working on a new book that focuses and how we are living in the times of Corona.
Hmm.
So you are using the pandemic as a way of
Yeah.
creating new stuff. So could you just speak a little more on that? Because BC mentioned using experiences to write, and so I'd just like you to touch a little on that. We don't have a lot of time, so after that we'll take the last set of readings and then we'll conclude for this session.
Sure. Okay, so in Kumasi, I spent my lockdown time in Kumasi. There was no way I was going to spend it anywhere else. And then I was having a chat with a friend, and he lapsed into some lamentations. His point was that his grandmother had died. The funeral was coming up, and now with the lockdown, they couldn't have it. And he was wailing essentially because he said they wouldn't want to bury his grandmother with only a few people around her. So that sparked a thought in my mind and said, okay, so what if, how has Corona transformed or changed certain things? And could they impact, for instance, on the way we conduct funerals? I've always had a very big interest in funerals. Not that I'm willing to have my funeral anytime soon, but I've always had an interest in the whole funeral thing. And so the book essentially focuses on how various characters play out in whether or not a long drawn ban on funerals, how they impact our societies, the whole funeral economy, as I put it, because I think it's a very important economy, and how our cultural practices could be forced to go into to evolve to a certain point because of the situation that we find ourselves in. So that is the theme that I explore, how the corona is impacting on our cultural beliefs and cultural practices, and particularly with respect to funerals and how it all pans out. At the moment, it's in embryotic stage.
Thank you for that. I think we could take a very short reading from you, and then we conclude this session with a few comments and another short reading from Bisi.
Okay.
So while you prepare, I'll just like to take some comments. And okay, so someone here says, Mami Ifwa says, definitely would love to read Bisi's book. It's beautiful. And Koklu Laye says, Bisi, I have shot away from your book because of the frog. Okay, so Rodney, over to you now.
Okay. Now, this is from my second book, Face Off with the International MP, and it was written in January 2017 during the burial rites of the Asante Hima, following some discussions that were going on Facebook. And it's titled Uncle Sam in Bremain, which is where the royals are buried. The smooth, urbane, and cosmopolitan Fancy Karachi, Samuel Farin Otu, educated at Adjapon College and the University of Cape Coast, has a particular passion for historical buildings. Tonight, he gets to visit the Royal Mausoleum at Bremain, the final resting place of Asante monarchs. It is 10 p.m. The Asante Hima will be buried tonight. Sami is excited as he approaches the building, munching on some cheddar cheese and Jacob's cream crackers. He holds a can of Coke in the other hand. Having read some nonsense about people being ordered to stay indoors tonight, he has slipped a copy of the 1992 Constitution of the Republic in his back pocket, in case an ignoramus tries to disturb his peace of mind. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, a figure appears in front of him, blocking his progress. The man looks hideous, his tongue reddened by cola nut and hanging out like a tired, panting dog's. His eyes appear the color of blood, and he wields a machete. A garland of green leaves hang around his neck, and he wears a permanent scowl on his face. He stinks. "Excuse me," Sammy says politely. The man refuses to budge. The man stares fiercely and intently at him, as if he's lost for words at the sheer bravado of the man before him. Then he growls, "What do you want here?" "I beg your pardon. Don't you have any manners? The least you could say is say good evening and introduce yourself. Mrs. Sampson of Chapel Street in Cape Coast taught me this when I was a child. You Habanasi people are true coarse. By the way, I'm Samuel F. Utu, BSc Honors. And you are?" He stretches out his hand. The executioner is rooted to the spot, unable to open his mouth. The sheer shock of anyone daring to actually speak back to him. His fingers stretch around the handle of his machete as he stares at Sammy's beautiful ringed neck. "Go back," he barks at him. Sammy is irritated. "Look, you have no authority to restrict my movement," he shoots back. "I am a citizen, not a spectator." He whips out a copy of the Constitution, flips to the relevant page, and offers it to the man. And of course, you must have read the celebrated case of Ankasi Traditional Council versus Ajay, where the court made lucid comments about the balance between traditional rules and fundamental rights of the citizen. "Eh?" goes the executioner. In all his years at the job, stretching back over 20 years, the executioner had never come across such temerity. For once, he seemed lost for words, and his arms seemed to go limp by the side, like an overripe plantain. The machete nearly fell from his hands. Sammy was not done. He continued on and on and on. The executioner was tired. His ears were hurting from all that English. His head began to pound. The concoction of bukutu infested with herbs and roots was beginning to take effect. He felt strength in his arms. The man's leg looked beautiful, even as he yapped on and veins appeared on the neck. Sammy was startled when he looked up and saw a glint of the machete. He had no time to scream, "I am a citizen, not a spectator," or dodge the onslaught. It was neat and it was swift. Blood gushed out of his neck like a furious fountain as his torso crumpled onto the ground and his head rolled away, coming to rest against a small rock. His eyelids fluttered briefly, and that was it. The pages of his constitution turned a bright scarlet as it fell into the pool of blood. The executioner sighed as he stepped over to pick the head. This skull will make a good calabash, he thought to himself. Sami woke up with a start, petrified, and realized his pajamas were soaked in sweat. He rubbed his eyes, his heart pounding. Then he touched his neck to make sure his head was still attached to his torso. He reached for his Bible, flipped to the 23rd Psalm, and began to read. The Lord is my shepherd.
Thank you very much for that. And uh, while the audience takes that in, I think that we would quickly zoom into business reading and then we can wrap up with this session as we don't have much time. So, Bisi, would like that you have your short reading and then we can conclude with this session, please.
Wow, I was dying to have Rodney talk some more about his reading.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of Bible, because you went on into the Bible, I'm
You saved
actually
the best for the last.
okay. So actually, I am going to pick up from, because of what you said, I'm going to go into scriptures too. So at this point,
That's been an inspiration.
yes. So at this point, Bisi is in Wesley Girls High School, Form 1, and they are, they are in religious class. So what do they call it? Religious knowledge. Okay, so let me just start reading.
Thank you.
In religious knowledge, Mr. Cobb has us reading about the lineage of King David, the ancestor of Jesus. And it has my head swimming. It goes like this. A man named Naomi had two sons who married foreign women, which in itself was disobeying God because the Israelites were not supposed to marry foreigners. Though I don't really understand why, since God created those foreigners in the first place, and everything he created is good. Now, when Naomi's son died, one of the daughters-in-law decided to return to her people. Ruth the Moabitess chose to stay with Naomi. But a woman needs a husband, so Naomi plotted to marry her off to a relative, an uncle named Boaz, which is okay because the women of Auntie's people marry their uncles and disgusting stuff like that. To get Boaz to notice Ruth, Naomi told her to gather what the laborers left behind after harvesting the grain, and at night time to lie at his feet. It's gross, considering Boaz had been working in the farm all day and had dirty feet, even if he rinsed them. I don't believe they had soap then. Ruth obeyed, and here is the confusing part. The Bible says Boaz went into Ruth. Vida Ayite raises her hand. Mr. Cobb, I don't understand. How can Boaz go into Ruth? Well, he didn't really exactly go into her. But that's what the Bible says here. You see, it's a manner of speaking. I get it immediately. I can tell others are getting it too because we are falling off our seats laughing. The oil on Mr. Cobb's sweaty face is enough to rub on a baby's bottom. Vida still doesn't understand. Mr. Cobb, how can a man go into a woman? Look, it can happen. How, Mr. Cobb, can you show us how Boaz went into Ruth? I can't show you. Mr. Cobb, but why? Why can't you show us how Boaz went into Ruth? I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you for that reading, Bisi. And a few people are asking about your book and where they can get copies. And so copies are available at Book Nook Store. You can WhatsApp them on 024 5275 981. The number is on the screen and so, or in the chat. And so anyone who wants a copy can get one. It's quite unfortunate that we don't have a lot more time to discuss more with you too, as it has been getting interesting as we are going. But I guess that is what a readathon is all about. It gets you gingered and then wanting to get copies of the book. So I'd like to say thank you to Bisi and Rodney. And as I finish here, we would have Kojo Akoto Boateng moderate the next set of readings. But before then, I think we can take a minute each comment from Bisi and Rodney. So I'll start with you, Bisi, your last comments and anything you'd like to say.
Well, thank you all for hanging in there. It has been very eventful. That white gentleman that decided to show us his precious assets, which really were nothing to write home about. I hope somebody is able to find him and expose him and shame him, and let him know that is really very little. And if I were him, I wouldn't be trying to expose myself. And then for all those hateful people who also came on, well, shame on you. And again, you are cowards. You can't redeem yourself. That's why you did that. But thank you all, wonderful people, for hanging in there. We love you, and we will keep writing, and we will keep speaking, even if people want to shut us down. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rodney?
Yes. I had never imagined the day when I would sit in the comfort of my office and join up with all you wonderful people and put ourselves out in the world. I'll probably be traveling halfway across the capital to sit and then, of course, have my favorite beer and all that, which I'm going to have after this session to celebrate this eventful session. It's been wonderful being here. I aligned myself, that grotesque photograph, camera shot of that man. Oh my God. Yeah. Bisi, don't remind me. I'd rather not see.
Well,
I am looking forward. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of loonies. There are quite a lot of loonies in cyberspace, aren't there? But I am looking forward to more of this. It's been great fun. I wish we had the whole day. And for all the people who joined us, who make this place tick, and who make it worth writing. The whole point of writing is having when you write and someone comes up to you and say, that book should not have ended that way. I don't like the turn of this twist. The twist of this story. I think that is the best feedback you can possibly get, because then that person has actually come up to own the story. And that is how authors are made, I believe. So thank you all so much, and looking forward. Bisi, I'm definitely going to get you. I trust. Promise me. And then I'll get you back.
Nice to meet. Very nice to meet you, Rodney. I hope we'll meet again very soon.
Sure. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being such a gracious host. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. And everyone, Bisi and Rodney do have their new books coming out. So please watch out for the new books and do grab copies of previous publications that they have. And thank you so much for tuning in, and stay tuned to the next round of readings.
Thank you.